continue the series exploring different countries all over the world, Jewish communities, an extra long edition because we're going to speak today about the Lebanese Jewish community, the Jewish community of Lebanon, the history within regards to who are the rabbis and the synagogues, and so on and so forth, just a history within regards to it. Now, we know that the history of the Jews in Lebanon encompassed the presence of Jews in present-day Lebanon, stretching back to biblical times. While Jews have been present in Lebanon since ancient times, their numbers obviously have dwindled, obviously in the Muslim era itself. Through the medieval ages, Jewish people often, unfortunately, faced persecution, but would retain their religious and cultural identity over here. For now, just going fast forwarding to the early 20th century, I think under French mandate of Lebanon and 1926 Constitution of Lebanon, the Jewish community was constitutionally protected. Those stages, like more of a golden era. However, after 1948, obviously, security of Jews would remain fragile. And the main synagogue in Beirut was bombed in the early 1950s. In the wake of the 1967 Arab-Israeli war, there was massive migration of around 6,000 Lebanese Jews from Lebanon to Israel to the Western countries. So much we're going to speak about the history of it. Just got a coffee at the moment. And we're speaking about the history of the Jewish community of Lebanon, friends, over here. Now, the Lebanese Civil War, I think, started in 1975. It would bring, unfortunately, immense suffering for the remaining Lebanese Jewish community. And I think some 200 people were killed in various different ensuing anti-Jewish pogroms at that stage in time, leading to, I think, a mass displacement of 1,800 of the remaining Lebanese Jews. The final exodus of Lebanese Jews happened in August 1982, when Israeli forces invaded Lebanon and laid siege to Beirut. Over 100 Jewish families were displaced after Israeli forces. At that point in time, they would bombard the Jewish quarter, leaving it nearly abandoned. This was reported over, according to Wikipedia, shelled its synagogue. There will be extensive damage. By 2005, the Jewish quarter of Beirut, Wadi Abu Jamil, only held 40 to 200 Jews. But you can see how the community dwindled and how anti-Semitism really has caused this all over the years. So anyone joining in, we are exploring the history of Lebanese Jewry. So let's backtrack a little bit. Antiquity. So in late antiquity, especially the Talmudic period in Jewish historiography, Jewish sages, the rabbis, Chazal, are recorded as having traveled to the land of Israel to Tyre, where they taught Jewish law, halacha, answered questions. Rabbinic traditions reference the activities of Yaakov of Kafar Naboria. He was a great sage from the fourth generation of Amoraim in Tyre. Other notable, let's say, Amora were active in this area of Tyre was Rabbi Mana bar Tanchum. According to the Talmud, Chia bar Abba went to Tyre and discovered that Rav Mana bar Tanchum permitted something called the Tur Musin. This is lupine beans over there. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai identified two routes that could be travelled on Shabbat without crossing the Shabbat Tzachum from Tiberias to Saphoris in Israel, and from Tyre to Sidon. This was featured over, I believe, in the Talmud. So that's another interesting tidbit from more Talmudic times within regards to Lebanon. There's more we can say over here. Another notable Amora was in Tyre was Rabbi Mana. So I think there's evidence, if I'm not mistaken, of Jewish migration from Tyre to Galilee, found in Greek language inscription on a stone lintel at a synagogue in Sephoris, likely during the 5th century. And the inscription, I think, references archy synagogues of Tyre and Sidon, respectively. Now, Middle Ages. As governor of Syria under the Caliph Uthman from 639 to 661 Common Era, there was someone of the name Muawiyah. He settled Jews in Tripoli, very interesting, Tripoli naturally being in Libya. Now, during the early Islamic period, Tyre was home to a substantial Jewish population. It happens to have been, I think at that stage in time, estimated at around 4,000 people prior to the Arab conquest, and benefited, let's say, from the Muawiyah's redevelopment of coastal cities. In 11th century, Tyre's economic and Jewish communal significance would grow, particularly with temporary relocation of the land of Israel, yeshiva, to the city between roughly 1077 to 1093. More can be said around that period. I think regional instability was under Fatimid Caliphate and including a failed rebellion in 1063 and the sack of Tyre in 1093, this would lead to a period of destruction in the city. Now, this was reported over using Wikipedia as source. The Damascus Jewish community ransomed captives from Tyre in the aftermath. Tyre remained a Jewish center during the Crusader period. There was a famous traveler who we've mentioned about various occasions on this series, named Benjamin of Tudela. He reported between 400 to 500 Jewish households. Just got a fly right next to me over here. I want to listen to it. 400 to 500 Jewish households, a number of synagogues, and a scholarly community. The Jewish presence largely ended with the Mamluk conquest in 1291, after which Tyre declined and became a secondary stop, more for pilgrims over here in of itself. So, where anyone tuning in to the channel at the moment, you're new to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. We're exploring the history of the Lebanese Jewish community here on this special edition over here. Just recording this here from Israel, from a park over here. So welcome to everyone, and we've got fantastic content. Now, the Ottoman period. Let's speak about that. During Ottoman period, the Deir al-Kamar hosted a Jewish community. It was the first documented. Remember, Rabbi Joseph Sofer would visit various places. He visited, I believe, in 1759. The community is cited in response to literature from the same period, indicating it had communal institutions, a Jewish court, Bet Din, as we call, and synagogue. Now, there was famous Rabbi Joseph Schwartz provides various additional context, estimating the community at 80 householders, mostly engaged in trade, also leading lands for iron production and owning vineyards and olive plantations. Following hardships in the late 19th century, the Jewish community of Deir al-Kamar dispersed, selling their properties. In the 1837 Tzfat earthquake, the Jews of Deir al-Kamar aided the Jewish people of Tzfat. In 1847, I believe, that was another milestone time period, let's just say in of itself. 1847 would see that unfortunately there was a blood libel incident. The community's demise came during the 1860. I think at that point in time, in 1860, it was highly reported over the civil conflict in Mount Lebanon, which led to displacement and eventual sale of their synagogue in 1893. So anyone joining in at the moment, we're exploring the history of Lebanon, the Jewish community over there here on this special edition, recording from the city of Bet Shemesh. So everyone, welcome to our fantastic channel here, and please subscribe as we explore the different countries all over the world, Jewish heritage there was. Now, early 20th century, 1911, Jews from Italy, Greece, Syria, Iraq, Turkey, Egypt, and Iran now would move to Beirut, expanding the community there with more than 5,000 additional members. I think Articles 9 and 10 of the 1926 Constitution of Lebanon guarantee the freedom of religion and provided at that point in time each religious community, including the Jewish community, the right to manage its own civil affairs matters, including education, and thus the Jewish community was constitutionally protected. A fact that did not apply to other Jewish communities in the region. That's something key that we must bring out over here. And more can be said within regards to the Jewish community. The Jewish community prospered under the French Mandate and Greater Lebanon, exerting considerable influence throughout Lebanon and beyond. They allied themselves with, I think, Pierre Gemayel's Phalangist party over there. It was a right-wing, let's say, Maronite group modelled after similar movements, I think, Italy and Germany, and Franco's Phalangist movement in Spain, and played an instrumental role in the establishment of Lebanon as an independent state. So very, very interesting enough. So we're exploring now about the history of Lebanon more towards the 20th century time period over here. More can be chronicled over here. So I think during the Greater Lebanon period, 2 Jewish newspapers were founded. The Arabic language that was called an Al-Alam Al-Israeli, the Israelite World, and the French language, Le Commerce du Levant, an economic periodical which continued to be in circulation even until quite recently, June 2021. The Jewish community of Beirut evolved in 3 distinct phases. Until 1908, the Jewish population in Beirut grew by migration from the Syrian interior and from other Ottoman cities like Izmir, Salonika, Istanbul and Baghdad. Commercial growth will obviously will actually also be seen. at that stage in time. In thriving port city, consular protection, and relatively safety and stability in Beirut, all accounts for the Jewish migration. Thus, from a few hundred at the beginning of the 19th century, the Jewish community grew to 2,500 by the end of the century and to 3,500 by World War I over there. So you can see there was a steady growth in the population at that window of time that's got to be pointed out. While the number of Jews grew considerably, the community remained largely unorganized. So there was that organization issue, let's just say, in itself, which would actually really affect the community, you could say, at that point in time. Yes, so very interesting. So just backtrack a bit, commercial growth in the thriving port city, consular protection there was relatively safe. Relatively safe, I think it was actually in Beirut at that point in time. I think it went from a few hundred at the beginning of the 19th century. The Jewish community would grow to 2,500 by the end of the century and 3,500 World War I. That's what I said before. Now, during this period, the community, as I said, lacked, let's just say, the organization, and they were quite disorganized. And during this period, the community didn't have all the fundamental institutions such as communal statutes, elected council, welfare and taxation mechanisms. The most organized and well-known Jewish institution in the city was probably the private Tiferet Israel, the glory of Israel. It was a boarding school founded by Zaki Cohen, who we're going to speak about in a minute. We've spoken about him in this series before. In 1874, the school attracted Jewish students from prosperous families like the famous Shlush family from Jaffa, the Moyal family also from Jaffa, and the famous Sassoon family, who we're going to speak about soon. They were from Baghdad. They were really big compound. Its founder, influenced by the Ottoman reforms and by local cultural trends, aspired to create a modern yet Jewish school, offered both secular and strictly Jewish subjects, as well as 7 languages. It also offered commercial benefits. The school was closed at the beginning of the 20th century due to financial hardship. So that's a key school. Let's speak about Zaki Cohen here, a key man in, let's just say, in Lebanese Jewish history. That's for sure. Over here. Anyone joining in, welcome to our channel. We are exploring the history of Lebanon, the Jewish community, the rabbinic structure, and everything else, Jewish life over there. So who was Zaki Cohen, friends? I think he was born in 1829 in Aleppo in Ottoman Empire, was a chief rabbi of the Jewish community in Beirut, Lebanon, and a playwright also. In 1874, he founded Beirut's first modern Jewish school called Tiferet Israel, the glory of Israel, like we spoke about before. And I think he was also in Hebrew, and the Al-Madrasa Al-Watiniya Al-Israeli, the national Jewish school, I think in Arabic, where he served as director. The school would continue to operate until 1899, when it was superseded by the Collège Alliance Israélite University of Beirut. So that was the Alliance system that went all through many countries at that stage in time. And we actually recorded a video on the history of the Alliance school system. Remember, I don't know if it wasn't a very religious school, so many of the Rabbanim were not necessarily for it itself, but nevertheless it was a school in Beirut and is a key an event, let's just say. And Rabbi Zaki Cohen died in Alexandria in 1904, so he lived approximately 75 years of age. So we're going to speak more about the history of the Lebanese Jewish community. Everyone, welcome to the channel. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. We're doing a video on the history of the Lebanese Jewish community over here on this special edition, just recording here from Israel at the moment. And we'll just say, just for a minute, just what we do here on this channel, because we've got really fantastic people watching in a moment. We're a community that records the history of great rabbis of yesteryear. And one project we're working on at the moment is recording the history of various different countries all over the world. The Jewish communities, we're doing a special edition over here where we explore who were the rabbis of these various countries, what was the synagogues there, the cemeteries, for example, the Jewish culture life like, what were the issues with anti-Semitism and what stages. So we've already recorded videos on various countries like Gibraltar. We have spoken about Afghanistan, Pakistan, and we've actually really concentrated on countries more in Central America, like Panama, Costa Rica. We spoke about El Salvador, Honduras quite recently, and the South American countries. If you look at our channel, we recorded about Brazil, we recorded about Venezuela, Peru, Cuba even, and I think hopefully we'll do that. We spoke about Chile also, and Colombia. Really, we're going into Jewish countries which many people have not went into, and today we happen to be exploring the Jewish history of Lebanon here on a special edition of your friends. And we do a lot of fantastic content here on this channel. We explore the archaeology of Israel, different sites of Israel. We do tours all over Israel also, and so on and so forth. So much to actually report over here. That's what I've just got to stress from the outset. Okay, so we're going to continue the video over here on the special edition. I'm just to relocate. Okay, so we're just repositioning, and we're going to continue about the history of Lebanon now. Okay, this is much better. I was just recording from outside just before, so we've just done relocation also. So we're going to continue the video over here, friends. Okay, so we're speaking about the history of Lebanese Jewish community at the moment. Now, let's go on. We're in 1908. There was a Young Turk revolution in 1908. This would spark the organization process. Within 6 years, the Beirut community created a general assembly and elected 12-member council, drafted communal statutes, appointed a chief rabbi, and appointed committees to administer taxation, education, and it would involve, I think, certain tensions, this process would, and I think even disputes would arise within the community. But eventually the community council established a rule and authority in the community. The chief rabbi would receive his salary also from the community, and it was de facto under the council's authority. I think in 1920, the establishment of Greater Lebanon, the Jewish community of Beirut became part of a new political entity. The French Mandate rulers adopted local political traditions of power sharing and recognized the autonomy of the various religious communities at that stage in time. Thus, I think the Jewish community was one of Lebanon's 16 communities and enjoyed a large measure of autonomy, more or less along the lines of the Ottoman millet system. During the third phase of its development, the community founded major institutions in Magen Avraham Synagogue in 1926. The renewed Talmud Torah was called Talmud Torah Selim Tarab, a community school. It was in 1927. And community would have welfare services, a Bikur Cholim. They would have a Ozer Dalim and a Matan Baseta societies also respectively. And the funding for all these institutions came from contributions of able community members who contributed, let's just say, on various different holidays, celebrations through subscription of prominent members, fundraising events they would hold, lotteries the community organized. In fact, the community was financially independent and did not rely on European Jewish philanthropy, which is very, very interesting. Now let's speak more about the Yishuv time period over here. The development of the Jewish Yishuv in Palestine influenced the Jewish leadership, very much so, who usually showed sympathy and active support for Zionism. The Jewish leadership in Beirut during this time aligned itself ideologically with an American-based B'nai B'rith organization through its local proxy, someone named Arzeh Lebanon Lodge, which was staffed by local community leaders. The B'nai B'rith Lodge in Beirut attracted social and economic elite, embarking on community progress, revival through social activism, Jewish solidarity and philanthropic values. Unlike, I think, the Alliance itself, who mainly aspired to empower Jewish individuals through modern education, the B'nai B'rith would strive to empower both individual and community as a whole. In Beirut, unlike other Jewish communities, most of the community council members were also B'nai B'rith members. Hence, there existed an overlap between the council and lodge. Of course, the Alliance school was popular in the community as it focused on French and prepared students for higher education. Since there was no Jewish, let's just say, I think at that point in time, There was no Jewish high school in Beirut. Many Jewish students attended foreign Christian schools, either secular or religious. The Jewish community was one of smaller communities in the country, and hence it was not entitled for guaranteed representation in parliament. Being excluded, let's say, from Lebanese political life, the Jewish leadership aspired to improve the community's public standing by consolidating at that point in time and improving the community as a whole. Overall, the French Mandate period was characterized by growth and development and stability. I think come the 20th century, the Jewish community, as I said before, in Lebanon showed little involvement or interest in politics. They were generally traditional. They opposed to traditional as opposed to religious, I think, at that point in time, and were not involved in the feuds of larger religious groups in the country. Obviously, we strive and we hope that Torah observance and mitzvot are going to be kept at a premium level everywhere. They tended to support Lebanese nationalism and felt an affinity towards France. French authorities at the time discouraged expressions of Zionism, which they saw as a tool of their British rival, and the community was mostly apathetic to it. A few community leaders, such as Joseph Fahy, I think, fervently supported Zionistic cause, and there was a level of support for the concept of a Jewish state in Palestine. The Jews in Lebanon had good contacts with those in Palestine, and there were regular visits between Beirut and Jerusalem. Accounts by Alliance Israelite Universal, which established schools that most Jewish children in the country attended, spoke of active Zionism, with a Jewish agency lamented the lack of national sentiment. The World Zionist Organization was also disappointed, let's say, with a lack of more active support, and the community did not send a delegation to the WZC, the World Zionist Congress. A young Lebanese Jew, someone named Joseph Azar, who took it upon himself to advance the Zionist cause with other individuals in October 1930, said in a report for the Jewish Agency that before the disturbance of August 1929, the Jews of Lebanon manifested much sympathy for the Zionistic cause and worked actively for the sake of Palestine. And they established associations which collected money for Keren Kemet Israel and Keren HaYisod. He said that after 1929, the Jews started to fear from anything having any connection with Zionism and ceased to hold meetings and collect money. He also said that the Jewish Communal Council in Beirut endeavored to prevent anything having a Jewish national aspect because they feared that this might wound the feelings of the Muslims. Other sources, I think, at that point in time suggested that such charity work was not such motivated by Zionism as I think it was said as an interest, let's just say, at that point in time to help the Jewish community itself. Now it's interesting, I think the Maccabi organization was recognized officially by Lebanese authorities, and was an active center for Jewish cultural affairs in Beirut and Seda, I believe, at that point in time. The Maccabi taught Hebrew language and Jewish history and was a focus point on small Zionist movements from the country. There was also a pro-Zionist element within the Maronite community in Lebanon. I think it was after 1929, riots in Jerusalem. I think there was a Grand Mufti of Jerusalem was expelled from Palestine, and he chose to settle in Lebanon, which continued obviously to mobilize resistance against, let's say at that point in time, Zionistic claims to Palestine. During riots, some Muslim nationalists, I think, and editors of a major Greek newspaper, both of them who saw the fate, let's just say, of the emerging Lebanese state as one within a broader Arab context, sought to incite the disturbances in Lebanon, where until that point most ethno-religious groups were aloof to the forthcoming conflict in Palestine. It also seemed to have an effect on the cryptic response given by the Interior Minister Habib Abu Shalah to Joseph Fahy on behalf of the Jewish community. He requested that they receive a seat in the newly expanded Lebanese parliament at that stage in time. So very interesting. Outside of Beirut, the attitudes towards Jews were usually more hostile. Come November 1945, 14 Jews were killed in anti-Jewish riots in Tripoli. Further anti-Jewish events occurred in 1948. Following the 1948 Arab-Israel War, which was highly documented, the ongoing insecurity combined with greater opportunities that Beirut offered prompted, let's say, most of the remaining Jews of Tripoli to relocate to Beirut. Now it's interesting. The Jewish community was traditionally located in the area of Wadi Abu Jamil and Ras Beirut, with other communities in Shuf, Yadi Al-Kama, Ali, Bamdoun, and Hasbaya. Lebanon was the only Arab country whose Jewish population increased after the declaration of the State of Israel in 1948. They would get as many as 10,000 people, I believe, at that stage in time. So that's very, very interesting. However, after, I think, the Lebanese crisis of 1958, there was many Lebanese Jews would leave the country, especially for Israel, France, United States of America, Canada, and Latin America. Now, I think the main synagogue in Beirut was bombed in 1950s, and Lebanese Chamber of Deputies witnessed heated debates on the status of Lebanese Jewish army officers. The discussion culminated in a unanimous resolution to expel and exclude them from the Lebanese army. The 2 Jewish army officers were discharged, but a few Jews continued to work for the government. The Jewish population of Beirut, which stood at 9,000 in 1948, dwindled to 2,500 come 1999. Very interesting. So you can see there was a decrease in size at that point in time. So very, very interesting. So friends, anyone joining us, we are exploring the history of the Lebanese Jewish community over here. A special edition of here, just recording this from Israel. And you're welcome everyone to our channel. Please subscribe to the channel at the moment as we're growing. We've got nearly at the moment 8,000 subscribers. So please join. I'm just going to take a 1-minute break and we're going to continue the video. We're just going to relocate position. I'm going to be back in half a minute. Just a half-minute break, and everyone, please enjoy. Just wait this space, don't go. Yeah, but just be careful with this, okay? I'll be half a minute. I'm just doing a live video, so. Friends, we're exploring the history of the country of Lebanon, the Jewish community over here. So everyone, welcome to the channel and welcome to this video. Okay, so we're talking about the Jewish community of Lebanon. We said it was traditionally in Wadi Abu Jamil, Ras Beirut, other communities in Shwaf, Deya. We've been talking about how, you know, it will evolve, the main synagogue, what actually happened at that point in time. Now let's speak about 1975 to 1976. I think there was only 2,500 Jews by 1969 after the Six-Day War, so the community was dwindling. Now the Lebanese Civil War, which started in 1975, was much worse for the Lebanese Jewish community. Some 200 people were killed in pogroms. Most of the 1,800 remaining Lebanese Jews migrated in 1976, fearing that growing Syrian presence in Lebanon would restrict their freedom to emigrate. Let's say beginning in 1975 and 1976, Jews began to leave their original neighborhood of Wadi Abu Jamil for Christian areas. In the 1970s, 1980s, Jews largely lived in harmony in the environment, though the last rabbi remaining in Lebanon left in 1977. In 1982, during, I think, the 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon, 11 leaders of the Jewish community were captured and killed by Islamic extremists. So you can see what a devastating effect that actually happened at that point in time. And Jews were targeted. Later years of the Lebanese Civil War, Isaac Sassoon, who was a leader of the Jewish community, kidnapped at gunpoint on March 1st, 1985, on his way from the Beirut International Airport after a trip to Abu Dhabi. Earlier kidnaps had also seized Eli Halak, 6-year-old physician, Chaim Cohen, a 39-year-old Jew, Isaac Tarab, Yehuda Ben Esti, Salim Jamus, and El Sra Cohen. Tarab and Sra, unfortunately, were killed by their captors, and a Shiite Muslim group called the Organization of the Oppressed on Earth, which is, I think, believed to have been part of, they actually had links, I think, to Hezbollah. The other fates remain unknown, but they were also believed to be killed. 1982, there was a war with Israel that would further reduce the number of Jews in the country. Much of the immigration was to countries with existing well-established Lebanese or Lebanese Jewish diaspora communities, such as in Brazil, France, Switzerland, Canada, United States. Despite such occasions of attacks, Lebanese Muslims and Christians and Palestinians protected the Jews living in Lebanon. Yasser Arafat, the leader of the PLO, ordered militants to protect, I think at that point it's on Magen Avraham synagogue in Beirut. Obviously, we see it becomes very, very bad later on. Now, the Palestinian militants provided humanitarian aid to the Jewish community affected by the civil war. Now, 21st century, almost all Lebanese Jews had fled the country by 2005, and the Jewish quarter of Beirut, Wadi Abu Jamal, was virtually abandoned. And after the assassination of Prime Minister Rafik Hariri, and I think there were only around 40 Jewish people left in Beirut, mostly elderly. In 2006, there was only 40 Jews left in Lebanon. 2010 they would start restoring an old synagogue in Beirut, the Magen Avraham synagogue, which we're going to speak about in due course. As the synagogue had fallen into disrepair several years earlier, the Solidé agreed to provide funds for the renovation because political officials believed it would portray Lebanon as an open society tolerant of Judaism. That's what's reported over. None of the Jews involved in the project agreed to be identified. International media and even some members of the Jewish community questioned who would pray at the synagogue. The decision received acclaim from both Sunni and Shiite Muslims. I think Hassan Nasrallah, the terrible Hezbollah leader, would welcome the authorities' decision of restoring the synagogue. Self-declared head of the Jewish Community Council, Isaac Arazi, who left Lebanon in 1983, eventually came forward but refused to show his face on camera in a television interview, fearing that his business would suffer if clients knew that he had been dealing with Jewish people. Arazi, I think, passed away in 2023. That's what's reported over. Yeah, so very, very interesting. I think Jews in Lebanon are mostly in or around Beirut. The community has been described as very elderly and apprehensive, let's just say. There's no services in Beirut synagogues. 2015, the estimated total population in Syria, Lebanon combined, only 100. 2020, only 20. Yeah, as of 2022, much of the Lebanese Jewish community have been dwindled. Jewish cemeteries have been abandoned. Jews largely hide identity. I think in Sadia, where Jews, let's say, have had presence since the 1st century, before Common Era, there is no indication of a Jewish presence at the moment over here. Now let's speak about some of the Jewish community presidents. Also, there's a whole list over here. I think prior to 1910, Ezra Anzarut was the president. Then it was followed by Joseph D. Farhi between 1910 to 1924. Joseph Dichi Bey between 1925 to 1927. Joseph D. Farhi 1928 to 1930. Selim Harari between 1931 to 1935 to 1938. Dieb Sadia and Joseph Dishi Bey, once again 1939 to 1950. Joseph Atiyah will become between 1950 to 1976 a president. Isaac Sassoon between 1978 to 1985. Raoul Mizrahi from 1985. Joseph Mizrahi 1986 to 2003. And Isaac Azari between 2005 to 2023. Now the chief rabbis, we're going to explore about the history of some of these rabbis in a minute. The first one it was between 1799 to 1829. Rabbi Moise Yedid Levi, Then Rabbi Ralph Alfan, Rabbi Jacob Bouquet, who we mentioned about, Rabbi Chaim Dana, that was followed by Rabbi, I think between 1908 to 1909. Rabbi Jacob Tarab between 1910 to 1921. Rabbi Salomon Tager between 1921 to 1923. Rabbi Shabtai Buchwat for 26 years till 1950. Then Rabbi Ben-Sion Lichtman, he was, I think, an Ashkenazi chief rabbi, 1938 to 1959. Rabbi Jacob Atia, 1949 to 66. And Rabbi Shaul Shrein, 1960 to 1978. Let's explore a few of the highlights of a few of these rabbis. One of the first rabbis we'll speak about is Rabbi Nissim Yehuda Danon, who was, I think, the last Chacham Bashi of the Ottoman period. He lived between 1874 to 1930. He passed away, I believe, in Tunisia, if I'm not mistaken. He was actually born in Jerusalem. He would become the 34th Rishon LeZion between Rabbi Chaim Moshe Elisha and Rabbi Moshe Yehuda Franco. And he'd be a rabbi, also chief rabbi in Izmir and in Rhodes and in Beirut, also in Lebanon. And he was, I think he was educated, obviously from Rabbi Menachem Danon. He went at the age of 19, he would actually learn and get smicha, rabbinic coordination at the, I think, rabbinic seminary in Paris, in France, and would really gain various different knowledge on languages. He was appointed, I think, the rabbi of the Beirut community, come out 1907, and he would have that position for a period of time. I think he would, at that point in time, he would get invited to Tzfat. He would visit over there, and I think he would take on various different, he would be appointed chief rabbi in various different places. I think in Turkey, if I'm not mistaken, and World War I would be a pivotal time at that point in time, and I think he'd become the last chief rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, or of the Ottoman area, and so on and so forth. He was Rishon LeZion, one of the famous rabbis. I think he would actually pass away in Tunisia, in Sfax, if I'm not mistaken, and he left various famous manuscripts, responses of great rabbis, if I'm not mistaken, and he writes also about his time period as rabbi, chief rabbis in all over those places, including in Lebanon. And he would have descendants, including Eliyahu Danon, Yaakov Nissim Danon, and famous people. Now, another famous rabbi from Lebanon. Anyone that you're tuning in at the moment, we're exploring the history of the Lebanese Jewish community, so please subscribe to the channel now if you're new onto the channel. Another great rabbi was Rabbi Yaakov Yosef HaKohen Trav from Salton. He was another key rabbi. He passed away in 1923, actually in Beirut. He was born in 1851, and he was a head of Jewish court also in Beirut. And he was actually, very, very interesting. He was the author of various important books. His wife's name was Rabbanit Rosa, I believe. Yes, so he would come inside the job. I think later, eventually, Rabbi Shlomo Teja, Rabbi Yehuda Danon would become the leaders of that. He passed away in 1923. Let's speak about Rabbi Shlomo Teja, another chief rabbi. He wasn't just a chief rabbi in Beirut in Lebanon. He was also chief rabbi also in Damascus. And he was a rabbi of Turkistan in Bukhara, and the sage, a great rabbi of Damascus, Syria and Lebanon, respectively. I believe he was born in 1866, and he passed away in, I think, 1935, 1936. Nearly, I think his father was famous Rabbi Moshe Ben Yitzchak Tajer, if I'm not mistaken. He was the head of the Sephardic Bet Din, where it's from, and he would learn in various different yeshivot in the city, and he would actually be very well traveled. He would travel to Paris and Berlin, acquire general education also there. He would receive a doctorate and also learn to speak 12 languages. He would get married to Rabbanit Miriam in Jerusalem, the daughter of Rabbi David Pinchasov. We're speaking about Rabbi Pinchasov. He was an immigrant from Bukhara, actually, and the couple, I think, would live in the Nachalat Shiva neighborhood over there. So let's say a bit more. He would actually end up in Lebanon. I think it was cool to come there at that point in time to represent the Jewish community, and I think it was the period of the French Mandate of Lebanon, and so that would bring the opportunity. Time Zionism was very much, let's just say, being aspired at that point in time. Those representatives, and he himself was very Zionistic. He did a lot of Zionistic activities, especially in Hebrew education and his diplomatic abilities. Their hope was that all this would help to promote Zionistic activity, and because I think there was Lebanon were obviously not very, the country itself obviously was not very Zionistic like he himself was. I think at that point in time would be there would be various arrangements introducing the mandate authorities in Lebanon, define the role of Rabbi of Beirut as a Rabbi of all Lebanese Jewry at that stage in time. His appointment made a strong impression among the Zionists, but yeah, very interesting. So that would be a key time period also. And there was different robust debates at that point in time, and much more can be said about it. Now another chief rabbi there will be was a rabbi named Rabbi Shabtai Buchbot, another rabbi we recorded a video about on the series. He was actually born in 1870. He passed away in 1948. He was also not just the chief rabbi of Lebanon. He was the head of Jewish court in Jaffa before. He was a rabbi of the Jewish congregation called I think Kilis in Syria. Obviously, he was a chief rabbi also of Aleppo in Syria, and then would become the chief rabbi of Jewish community in Lebanon. Yeah, so he was born himself, I think, in Jaffa, and the family itself was obviously Sephardic, and I think if I'm mistaken, his father was Rabbi Shlomo Buchlot, and he happened to be a Kubal in Yeshivat Chesed El in Jerusalem. And while he was young, I think they moved to Eretz Yisrael from Rabat in Morocco. He would learn in an Alliance school system while he was younger, Jewish school system, more secular. And he would learn Torah also, and I think privately from some of the Rabbanim inside the country. I think Bnei Ha'idah Hasfaradit B'Yafo. ונוסף ללמד במשך הזמן שפות שונות. So we learn various different languages. ושלט באנגלית, צרפתית וטורקית. We learn French, Turkish, English, Ivrit also, Ladino, Arabic also. I think while he would move to Jerusalem eventually, he'd get married to Rabbanit Mazal. She was a daughter of Rabbi Ezra Di Biton, who was, I think, from Saloniki, if I'm not mistaken. Also, he would learn Shas. He would actually learn under Rabbi Yaakov Meir, the Rishon, and he received rabbinic ordination in the Beit Midrash Rabbanim Istanbul. I think we actually spoke about that before. Very interesting. Jewish court in Jaffa, and head of Jewish courts, I think, eventually. And I think it was during the First World War, בזמן מלחמת העולם הראשונה, הגולה לסיריה, ושימש כרב קהילה היהודית בקיליס. He would become working in Kilis in Syria, בצפון מערב המדינה. At that point in time, בעקבות ייצור של רב חזקיה שבתאי לבונוס איירס. I think Rosh Sheptia Cheskai, Rav Chezkiah Shabtai would move to Buenos Aires and shlichut to I think gather money for orphans, if I'm not mistaken. Rav Buchot was additions will come at that point in time, 1925, until he passed away in 1948. He was appointed the head rabbi of Beirut, a chief rabbi of Lebanon, a very prestigious position that was. And I think at that point in time it was becoming more modern also, the community. I think in 1939, היה מועמד למשרת הרב הראשי לתל אביב. ולבסוף לא נבחר. I think, yeah, very interesting. But he passed away in 1948 on the 17th of Nisan. Now, another rabbi, I think from Ashkenazic descent, who will become also chief rabbi of Lebanon, was a rabbi named Rabbi Ben-Zion Lichtman. I think we recorded a video about him about 4 weeks ago before Sukkot. He was born in 1892. He passed away on the 25th of February, 1964. That was Yud Bet Adar. He was a head of Jewish courts. He was an author of the Bnei Tzion book. And it was a book on the Code of Jewish Law, on Orach Chaim, respectively. He actually passed away, I think, in Jerusalem. And he was actually born, I think, actually in Ukraine, which is interesting enough. So he actually has a very decorated history. He was actually a Talmid of Rabbi Yoel Shorin and Rabbi Issa Zalman Meltzer, if I'm not mistaken. So he would end up in Eretz Yisrael over there, and he would become a rabbi, I think, in the Kehillah himself. I think he had a connection with Rabbi Abraham Yitzhak Kohen Cook and Rav Meltzer, as we mentioned about before, and he would be appointed Moret Tzedek, a manhig, and really do a lot, let's just say, in of itself, like all over the different places. He'd become a shochet and a bodek, kosher slaughterer, and a bodek, and a dayan, an educator, I think really representing the Ashkenazi community in history, in those vicinities. And then I think after Rabbi Shabtai Buchbot passed away, he became the overall chief rabbi of Beirut. That was taking on roles not just for the Ashkenazi community over there at the time, but the Sephardic community also. And So very, very interesting. We can say a bit more within regards to him. He was also the rabbi of the Ashkenazi synagogue in Beirut, and had a key role in the Bet Sefer, the school of Talmud Torah over there. And he was connected, I think, with the Alliance school system, Kol Yisrael Chaverim over there. I think his kids would learn there in that. And he would also work with in regards to Eretz Yisrael, the Mizrahi organization. That's another interesting factor we have to point out about him also. So that's very interesting. I think he had a connection. He was the head of the Agudat Yisrael, and connected with Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Levin and Rabbi Moshe Blod. And I think they would visit each other in 1945. And he was close also to Rabbi Yitzchak Herzog, Rabbi Yehuda Leib Maimon. These were key people at that point in time. And various different people of that congregation. I think in the 1950s, he would meet Thea Jumi'al, if I'm not mistaken. And he was associated also with the Maccabi organization, and so on and so forth. And various different. He was working very much for the Poel Mizrahi, very Zionistic organization. And I think he passed away in maybe 1964. He was buried in Har Menachot, if I'm not mistaken. And let's speak a bit about some of the synagogues now from Lebanon, including the Magen Avraham synagogue, obviously Orthodox Jewish congregation, located in the Wadi Abu Jamil area in downtown Beirut. Obviously Sephardi, as we said before. It was established, I think, in 1925. The synagogue was damaged by bombardments during the Lebanese Civil War. Restoration of the synagogue began in May 2009, with building touches made to the interior of the building. I think the newspaper Haaretz, according to Wikipedia, reported that the synagogue restored to glory and renovated beautifully. The synagogue reopened in 2014, was slightly damaged, I think, by the 2020 Beirut explosions. I think they have a daughter synagogue in Canada, actually called Congregation Magen Avraham. Interesting enough. Now, let's talk. There was a big earthquake which destroyed several cities in Lebanon. Magen Avraham was constructed in 1925. Moise Abraham Sassoon of Calcutta, on land donated by Isaac Mann. It was designated by the architect Bindo Manham, and construction was overseen by Ezra Benjamin and Joseph Balaya. The head of the Jewish community, Joseph Farhi, helped in raising additional funds to complete the interior. The synagogue was also used for Torah and scientific lectures, weddings and other festive events. And interesting, in the 1950s and 1960s, there were 16 synagogues in Beirut that were, at that point in time, all full, according to Lebanese expatriates who moved from Beirut to Paris in 2003. I think Jews were entitled to the same rights as the other minorities, as we spoke about before, and the number of Jews was increasing even after the 1948 Arab-Israel War, by which time there was about 14,000 Jews in Lebanon. In 1976, as I mentioned before, there was civil war, and Joseph Farhi would transfer the Torah scrolls from the synagogues to Geneva, and they would entrust to renowned Jewish Lebanese banker Edmond Safra, who preserved them in his bank's coffers. Most of them have since been relocated to Sephardic synagogues in Israel. I think although the greater part of the community had already immigrated in the 1958 crisis, in the Lebanese civil war, there was approximately 100 Jewish families still living in the quarters of the synagogue prior to the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. During the 1982 Lebanon War, I think we'll talk about Yasser Arafat at a point in time, and the PLO forces and Christian phalangists were situated in Wadi Abu Jalib, and leading to, we'll talk. It's just going back more towards the synagogue. We talked about in 1982 that we damaged the synagogue. The synagogue was abandoned. I think shells would hit the building, leaving rubble and debris strewn across the floor. 2 marble tablets representing the Aseret Dibrot, the 10 Commandments, and a marble Star of David were also shattered. Dozens of Jewish families were among those displaced by shelling of that specific area. That's what we've got to point out. Other synagogues in Lebanon includes the Alei Synagogue, also known as the Ohel Yaakov Synagogue. It's located in Alei, the Alei district of Lebanon, and the synagogue was completed in 1895. Once again, a Sephardi synagogue over there. I think the Jewish settlement in Alal began in 1860 when Deir el-Kama Jews from the community in migrated to the town due to tensions between the Christians and Jews. Beirut-Damascus Railway, I think after there was opening, and the Jews, I think there was a generous man named Ezra. He was the son of Rabbi Yaakov. I'm not sure if it was Rabbi. Someone named Yaakov in Srot built the synagogue for the Jewish community in 1895 and will name it after his father. I think we talked about there was Jewish publishing houses, printing houses. There's Al-Alham, 1922, and published that the synagogue had been painted with oil paint and that electricity had been installed in the synagogue for the first time, cleaned the synagogue and refitted the mikveh, the spiritual bath that was adjacent to it. Then another synagogue in Lebanon is called the Bam in the LA district also, opened, I think completed in 1922, one of the four big synagogues of Lebanon. Its structure, I think, still stands despite building being abandoned. Until the Civil War, a small Jewish community, and during the, let's say, the Hamondeh, existed in the towns of the First Lebanese War, 3 Jewish families. This large, magnificent synagogue served the Jewish people. Another synagogue, the Dia al-Kamara synagogue. Obviously, I don't think it's standing now, the synagogue. The synagogue is the oldest synagogue in Mount Lebanon. The synagogue served the local Jewish population, some of whom were part of the immediate entourage of the Fakhar al-Din II. Interesting enough. So let's speak a bit about it. I think it stood between 1638 all the way to 2016, Sephardi synagogue over there. It would remain under Jewish ownership even until the dispersal of the local Jewish community in the after, let's say, math of the sectarian conflict. Excellent condition. It was closed to public security reasons and was entrusted to a French cultural center, Lebanon's Direction General des Escantes, translated as a General Directive of the Antiquities, respectively over there. Very, very interesting. So I think famously Yitzhak ben Tzvi would actually visit at that point in time. He was also, just to go on a tangent, Yitzhak ben Tzvi was also, I believe, the head of the Poalei Zion, chairman of the National Committee, a member of the Jewish community of independence. He was a researcher, historian of the state of Israel. So I think he would actually visit this synagogue, if I'm not mistaken, and speak about it. Now, another synagogue in Lebanon is the Sidon synagogue. What is that? Located in the old city of Sidon, in a Jewish neighborhood, and the quarter known as Harat al-Yahud. The synagogue is one of the oldest synagogues in the world. That's something that we have to point out about it. Obviously located in Sidon. Let's speak a bit about the history. I think it was in 1833. It's believed to rest on an older synagogue, which dates all the way back to the destruction of the second Bet HaMikdash. And very interesting. I think, although not big in size, it's considered one of the main synagogues in Lebanon, which includes a Magen Avraham synagogue in Beirut in April 20. Very interesting. Many Lebanese Jews began to leave Sidon after the Lebanese Civil War in 1975, which explains the synagogue's dissipated state at that stage in time. So, very interesting. Anyone that's tuning in at the moment, we are exploring the history of the Jewish community of Lebanon over here on this special edition over here. So welcome everyone to the channel that's tuning in over here. And as we're really going from strength to strength, we're just going to just relocate again, just because there was a connection issue within regards to, so we'll relocate over here because internet connection. I'll just take a 1 minute break, friends. As friends, we're on this special edition over here. We're exploring the history of the Jewish community of Lebanon over here. So thanks everyone for joining and enjoy. Don't forget, okay, let's talk a bit more about the Jewish community history of Lebanon. Let's go back a bit again now. I think it was in 1710 there was significant immigration of Jews to the Shof Mountains of Lebanon. That's where really people will start coming in. The Shof village of Deir al-Kama was one of the first places in Lebanon with a large Lebanese Jewish population. We spoke about the first chief rabbi was Rabbi Moshe Yedid Levi. He would serve between the years 1799 and 1829 as a chief rabbi over there. So he's a key figure. The immigration of Jews to Lebanon peaked from the early 19th century to the second half of the 20th century. beginning with immigrants from Akko in 1809, Greece in 1821, Egypt and other parts of North Africa in 1837. People come from Syria, Iraq and Iran between 1900 to 1955. It's interesting, Ashkenazic Jews would actually immigrate from Europe in 1833. So that's how we spoke about Rabbi Litzman, or Lichtman, who would become a chief rabbi in the 1900s. Now, in the first half of the 20th century, people described life as a Jewish person in Lebanon as well integrated with congenial relationships with neighbors and community members, regardless of religion. Many traditions were shared between Lebanese Jews and people of other religions. Obviously, we talked about the two schools that taught Hebrew and other subjects related to Judaism. For centuries, Lebanon had a balance of Muslim and Christian populations, which allowed for balanced government structure. The arrival of Palestinian refugees in 1948 started the shift towards a Muslim majority. Simultaneously, anti-Zionist demonstrations began, along with an emerging hostility towards the Jews, and the 1948 Arab-Israel war would break out. So that's what we talked about beforehand. We talked about already about the synagogue and the civil war at that point in time. It's actually interesting, the reconstruction of the Magen Avraham synagogue, I think in 2012, just to go on in the 2000s, early 2000s, was funded by private donors and solidaire donations, and a construction company owned by, reported over by the family of assassinated Prime Minister Rafik Hariri. I think another synagogue still standing and serving as a religious landmark we mentioned about before, the Ohel Yaakov synagogue, the Tent of Jacob synagogue. Inside it, it's now private residence, I believe. And the Bamdun synagogue, which we mentioned also about before, is known as a new temple because it was the last temple built in Lebanon. It was the largest synagogue ever built in Lebanon, respectively. So that's something else that we've got to point out. And now we know that Lebanese Jews living in diaspora are strongly connected to their roots. That's something we have to point out. Let's explore with you the highlights within regards to, and facts within regards to Lebanese people and Lebanese Jewry. Just using a few tidbits actually from the Chabad website here. Now, the cedar trees of Lebanon was used actually in the Bet HaMikdash. What's this about? King Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, prepared to build a holy temple in Jerusalem. He turned to Hiram. He was the king of Tyre for Lebanon's world-famous cedar wood. Hiram happily agreed, sending massive rafts, let's just say, of cedar logs floating down the Mediterranean coast of Jerusalem. These majestic trees are mentioned in the Torah, I think, in the book of Tehillim. Even likens the righteous to the lofty cedars of Lebanon. Today, only a fraction of those ancient cedar forests remain. Some small groves still stand, with trees that are thousands of years old. One grove in the Shauf region is said to have been planted by Jewish people long ago, in the hope that its wood would one day use to be built Be'ezrat Hashem, the third Bet HaMikdash. What's interesting also about Lebanon, they share a lot in common with Syrian Jews. For much of its history, Lebanon wasn't its own country. It was part of broader empires and regions. As a result, Lebanese Jews developed customs and traditions very similar to those of neighboring Syrian Jewish communities like Damascus and Aleppo. I think when tragedy struck, they would also help straight away. I think in 1837, there was a terrible earthquake that hit northern Israel, destroying the city of Tzfat, which we mentioned about before in the series, claimed thousands of lives. In a natural display of Jewish solidarity, a group of Jews from Lebanon town of Deir al-Kama, approximately 55 miles away, came to help, clearing the rubble and helping bury the dead. Another interesting thing. We spoke about the growth during the 20th century, the early part, especially places like Sidon, Tripoli, Baalbek and Haspaya. I think in the early 1900s, Lebanon would now become a place where Jews would come from Syria, Italy, Turkey, even Poland, obviously because of the political stability and growing opportunities. It's interesting. At its height, there were 17 synagogues in Beirut, 2 more in Bamdown and Alay. So there was many synagogues, more than 20 in Lebanon. They built many beautiful synagogues. Obviously, we spoke about the Magen Avraham synagogue in Beirut, which was commissioned by the Sassoon family in 1926, and we spoke about how it was damaged. Then, obviously, we mentioned about the Deir al-Kama synagogue, built in 1638, under auspices of the Druze leader Fakhr ad-Din Mak, I think the second, an ancient Sidon synagogue, which is over 1,000 years old. We know that Lebanon itself was a haven among hostile Arab states. I think after Israel declared independence in 1948, Jews in many Arab countries faced violence and were forced to flee. But Lebanon was different due to favorable attitudes of many political leaderships over there. It's interesting, they would make pilgrimages to Zebulun's tomb too. One of the most ancient Jewish sites, I think, in Lebanon is a tomb of Zebulun, one of Jacob's 12 sons I spoke about. I think it's located in the port of Sidon. In earlier times, Jews traveled all over Lebanon, and even from the land of Israel, would make yearly pilgrimages to this site. Also, visitors will call it Gan Eden, this place, because it's on the stunning Mediterranean coastline, a mild climate. Jewish visitors to Lebanon often exclaim, "This place is Gan Eden, Garden of Eden." In fact, this accolade echoes the words of the prophet Ezekiel, who described the ancient city of Tyre as if it were Gan Eden, reported over. It's actually interesting, another tidbit with regards to the Lebanese Jewish community, that Yom Kippur concluded with a special fragrance. Now, Lebanese Jews kept many unique and beautiful customs. For example, on the first night of Rosh Hashanah, they would dip bread into sugar to herald a sweet new year. During the concluding of Yom Kippur, the prayer of Ne'ilah, the Levites would wash hands of the Kohanim with water soaked with orange blossoms, uplifting the last moments of the fast with a refreshing fragrance. Another interesting thing is we know that the Safra family, brilliant family, they made a huge impact also globally, but they were from Lebanon. Obviously, one of the most prominent Jewish families to come from Lebanon is the Safra family. Originally, obviously, from Syria, they moved to Lebanon in the 1910s and built a successful banking business. They gave very generously to Jewish causes around the world. They helped build synagogues and support Jewish education and more. They did. So we can really see more. Very interesting. So we spoke, just going back to the Magen Avram synagogue, it was actually built by Abraham Sassoon, Moise Abraham Sassoon of Calcutta, and it was donated by Isaac Mann, I mentioned about before. It was actually an architect named Bindo Manham, and Ezra Benjamin and Joseph Balaya would actually see to it, the construction. And the head of the Jewish community at the time, as I mentioned before, was Joseph Fahy, who would raise a lot of funds, and the synagogue was used for Torah and scientific lectures, weddings and other festive events. Let's speak about that, a bit about the famous Sassoon family over here. They were a wealthy Baghdadi Jewish dynasty associated with finance, banking, capital markets, the exploration of oil and gas, Judaism and conservative politics, opium trading, philanthropy. I think their principal vehicles, Sassoon and Co. and the J. Sassoon Financial Group, LLC, are domiciled in Europe, Asia and North America. And I think members of the family include David, he lived between 1792 to 1864, Joseph Sassoon, passed away in 1872, Sir Albert David, between the first baronet, between 1818 to 1896, famous man named Elias David. He lived between 1820 to 1880. And another famous man we spoke about, Sassoon David Sassoon. He lived between 1832 to 1867. I think Arthur Abraham David lived between 1840 to 1912. Remember, this is just a few of the Sassoon people. There were many more. Solomon David Sassoon, rabbi we spoke about, 1841 to 1894. Sir Sassoon David, the baronet, was between 1849 to 1926. Edward Shellim was between 1869 to 1928. Sir Edward Albert was between 1856 and 1912. And then there were other famous people, I think, like Robert Isaac Esti, Baron James, I think currently. Very interesting. Rabbi Solomon David was between 1915 to 1985. Now, the family, the Sassoon family itself, was known as the Rothschilds of the East because they had immense wealth that they accumulated in Asia. The family's business in China, India and Hong Kong were built to capitalize on the opium trade. As more family members gravitated towards Lebanon, to London, they became prominent in England and were ennobled by Queen Victoria. Although most biographical data about the Sassoons list Baghdadis, Iraqis as the place of origins, there's someone named Dan Gross, an American journalist, claims that the Sassoon family have their origins in Aleppo in Syria. They later moved to Mumbai, India, and they emigrated to China, England and other countries. From the 18th century, the Sassoons were one of the wealthiest families in the world, with a corporate empire spanning the entire continent of Asia. Let's explore a few of the children of David Sassoon. He had 8 children that would branch out in various directions. They were heavily involved in the shipping and opium trade in China and India. Now, anyone, you're welcoming to the channel over here, you're watching this video at the moment. We're exploring the history of Lebanon. Please, friends, subscribe to our channel and our community. We've got fantastic content here on this channel, just as a side point. Who were the 8 children of David? Included Elias David Sassoon. He lived between 1820 to 1880. It's actually interesting. His son, by his first wife, had been the first of the sons to go to China in 1844. He later returned to Bombay before leaving to establish the E.D. Sassoon and Co. In 1867, with offices in Bombay and Shanghai. Albert Abdullah David Sassoon lived between 1818 to 1896. He would run the firm on his father's death and notably constructed the Sassoon docks, the first wet dock built in Western India. And with 2 of his brothers, he later became prominent in England, and the family were friends of the Prince of Wales, later King Edward, I think the 7th. Rachel Sassoon Beer, one daughter of the family, Rachel Sassoon Beer, joined her husband in running a number of British newspapers, including the Sunday Times, I think between 1893 to 1904, and the Observer, very interesting. He'd also have grandchildren, and various different were heirs of David, including Sir Edward Albert Sassoon. He was the son of Albert, married to Eline Caroline de Rothschild, who would settle in England. He was conservative, I think. The seat was inherited by his son, Sir Philip Sassoon, between 1888 to 1939, between 1912 until his death. Philip served in the First World War as military secretary to Field Marshal Sir Doug Haig, and during the 1920s and 1930s as British Undersecretary of the States of Affairs, and the 20th century English poet, one of the best in World War I, a poet, Sigurd Sassoon, was also very well known. He was the great-grandson of David. Another one from the Sassoon family is James Sassoon, Baron Sassoon, also known as, was born as James Mayer. He was a British banker and former treasurer of the Commercial Secretary. He's mentioned in the Paradise Papers as one of the beneficiaries of a tax-exempt Cayman Island trust fund worth $236 million in 2007. And that's very interesting. David Solomon Sassoon, another famous man we spoke about. I think we recorded a video about him about 4 months ago. He lived between 1880 to 1942. He was a collector of Jewish books, manuscripts, catalogued them in 2 volumes. I think much of his collection is stored at the British Library in London, and some examples of his collection are maintained at the University of Toronto Library in Canada. And he was the son of David Solomon and Flora Abraham. Rabbi Solomon David, between 1915 to 1985, would then carry on the family's rabbinical tradition and move from Letchworth to London and then to Jerusalem, I think come up 1970. Now, Flora Abraham had moved from India to England in 1901 and established a famous salon in her London home. And Rabbi Solomon Sassoon had 2 sons, Isaac S.D. Sassoon and David Solomon Sassoon, who were also both rabbis. Interesting. Now, who was Joseph Sassoon? Joseph Sassoon, another key member. He first went to Thessaloniki in Greece, later to Aleppo in Syria, where he established a merchant house, and later his business interests spread to Alexandria, Cairo, Morocco, Italy, which included a shipping company and a money exchange house. His 5 sons branched also into many directions. You can see the philanthropy and brilliance would go into various different directions. The children of Joseph Sassoon include Moses Sassoon. Between 1828 to 1909, he would return to Baghdad in 1852, moved to Egypt. He built a financial house of Joseph Sassoon's sons, which later expanded and became an agent for Credit Foncier in Egypt. Now, okay, so there's many, many more lines of the Sassoon family over here, and we're going to continue this. Friends, anyone that's joining in, we're exploring the history of Lebanese Jewry, and some of the synagogues, the history within regards to it, the philanthropists, the rabbis. So welcome everyone. You're new to the channel, please subscribe to our channel now over here. We really appreciate it. Please hit the like button also to the video. Now, another famous philanthropist who we mentioned about before is Edmund Safra. He lived between August 1932. He passed away on the 3rd of December 1999. He was a Lebanese Brazilian billionaire banker and a philanthropist of Syrian descent. He continued his family tradition of banking in Brazil and Switzerland and was married to Lily Watkins from 1976 until he passed away. He died, unfortunately there was a fire which bring about a huge media coverage. It was judicially determined. I think it was apparently an arson attack, sadly, but he did great amounts with his wealth. He was 67 years of age, and he died in Monaco, I believe. And his parents were Jacob Safra and Esther Safra. His brothers were Moise Safra, and Joseph Safra, respectively. Now, Safra, he believed that constructing and renovating synagogues, he did huge financial work all over the different dimensions. But just speaking about the synagogue work he did, he constructed many synagogues. He renovated synagogues in important places for potential Jewish communities to flourish, and around the world, bearing his father's name to testify to this commitment. Many of these were built in the world's major centers, but was also helped to build synagogues in more remote communities, such as in Manila and in Kinshasa. 500 years after the last synagogue was built in Madrid, he would construct a new one there. He also helped renovate and enlarge synagogues in Amsterdam, Istanbul, Naples, Budapest, Rhodes, and Vienna. And also, Mr. Safra served the oldest synagogue in France, in Clermont-Ferrand, from destruction and buying it for the community. He contributed, let's say, to the expansion of the Cannes synagogue and Synagogue Bet El in Paris. He also helped refurbish synagogues in many small French cities, including Evian and Annemasse and others. Among the synagogues is Edmund J. Safra Synagogue in New York City. I think he supported a number of synagogues in Israel. The tombs of, also he would support the tombs and spend a lot of money on the tombs of Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It was very important for him to work. He was a generous supporter of these sites, and for many years on Shavuot evening, the anniversary of his father's death, he would go to pray at the tomb of Rabbi Meir, I believe, Baal Hanes. Many Jewish institutions and programs around the world bear his name. It's very interesting, the great philanthropy of the Safra family. Now, the Jewish cemeteries in Beirut, the Bet Lebanon Jewish Cemetery is the only Jewish graveyard reported over here on Wikipedia in Lebanon's capital of Beirut. And the cemetery, I think, is located quite close to an area called the Sodeko Square in the Ashafar district of Beirut, and accessible through a gate, the Damascus Road, also known as the Rue de Damas. Now, the graveyard was established in 1829 when the Rabbi Moise Yedid Levi was buried there. In the following 2 centuries, more than 3,000 Lebanese Jews were buried there. During the Lebanese Civil War, 1975 to, I believe, 1990, the cemetery was at a green line of demarcation line which separated the predominantly Muslim part of West Beirut from the predominantly Christian East Beirut control. Both Eliman was controlled far-right Philippines of the Lebanese front, which used landmines to keep its opponents from crossing the cemetery. Now, several graves were hit and damaged by rockets and shells during conflict by the cemetery, and was never hit by desecration. After the war, it was determined by the Lebanese armed forces. Interesting enough. Now, another place, I think, what was the name of the Jewish quarter in Lebanon? It was a place called the Wadi Abu Jamil. It was located, the Jewish quarter located in Beirut in Lebanon. It located in the city's central district, it was. And let's just say it was Beirut's largest and most important synagogue was there, obviously the Magen Avraham synagogue, which we spoke about before. And the neighborhood was home to Lebanese centuries-old Jewish community, and also for the more recent Jewish refugees that came from Syria and Iraq. Emigration from the community began in the earnest of the 1967 Arab-Israel War. During 1982, we spoke about Lebanese war, and Yasser Arafat took control of much of this neighborhood at that stage in time. So very, very interesting. Just backtracking again with regards to earlier history, we didn't speak much about post 15th century. So it's actually interesting. Nachmanides, Rabbi Yitzchak B. Samuel of Accra, according to Jewish Kabbalists, and no, he was a student of Nachmanides, Rabbi Isaac B. Samuel of Accra, he claims that many Jews were killed during the Muslim conquest of the city, I think of Beirut, if I'm not mistaken, in 1291. Another student, I think, of Nachmanides, would stop in Beirut at the beginning of the 14th century, did not note any presence of Jewish people at that point in time. And there was a student, I think, of the Italian Rabbi Ovadia di Avram Bartonero, wrote in a 1495 letter at Beirut or at Baroto, there are no Jews, and I do not know the reason, because the Ishmaelites at Baroto are better than all the other parts of the kingdom and are very well disposed, let's just say, towards the Jewish people. Beirut's Jewish community was renewed after the expulsion from Spain in 1492. 1521, someone named Moses Basola found 12 Jewish families from Sicily living in the city. During Basola's stay, he also noted that Beirut's Jews were particularly interested in the activities of someone named David Rubeni, whom a Jewish merchant had encountered in Gaza. Now, Abraham Castro was in charge of the customs during that period. There was another man named David de Beth Hillel, who visited Syria in 1824. He observed that there are in Beirut some 15 families of Jewish merchants, natives of the country, who speak Arabic and have a small synagogue. Their customs, as to say, resembling those of I believe, I think at that point in time, the customs will be resembling those of the Jews of Palestine. The writer and poet Ludwig August von Frankel visited Beirut in 1856. He found 500 Sephardic Jews living there, most of whom were working as merchants and porters. Jews also began arriving in Beirut from Damascus, Smyrna, Aleppo, Constantinople, and even Russia. Now, sadly, there were blood libels also, I think, in Lebanon. I think 2 blood libels were brought over. I'm reading this actually from the website over here of the Museum Ha'am Yehudi, the Jewish Museum of, respectively. So I think one took place it happened during the second half of the 19th century, one in 1862, another in 1890, both of which led to Christian attacks in the Jewish quarter. Order was finally restored in 1890 by the Turkish authorities, and the rioters were arrested. Now, community institutions during the late 19th century included a synagogue and 12 Batei Medrash. In 1878, as I mentioned before, the Alliance Israelite Universal opened a school for girls. A school for boys would follow a year later. A craft school for girls, also under auspices of Alliance, opened in 1897. There were 271 students enrolled in the boys' school and 218 enrolled in the girls' school in 1901, reported over. In 1880, there were about 1,000 Jews in Beirut. 1889, that number had grown to 1,500. Come 1892 to 1906, 3,000. And between 1907 to 1910, up to 5,000. Beirut's Jewish population grew after the First World War, and particularly after Beirut was established as a new capital of Lebanon. The community came to be regarded as the most highly organized in Lebanon and Syria, as we mentioned before. Obviously, Magen Avraham was the center of the community's institution, which would include the Alliance school systems, congregational schools, and a B'nai B'rith lodge, and a Maccabi club. Most of Beirut's Jews were middle class, described as, according to the museum website. But come with the 20th century, the Jews were no longer confined to a special quarter, but the poorer Jews tended to live on the streets that had once been part of the Jewish quarter. Nonetheless, I think the Jewish quarter, the former Jewish quarter, still played a significant role in the public imagination. Now, there was establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. Anti-Jewish demonstrations were held, and mobs descended, I think, the Jewish quarter. They were eventually, I think, dispersed by the Christian community. Anyone that's joining the channel at the moment, please subscribe to the channel now. We're a community here. We're learning about the history of Lebanese Jewish community over here. So please appreciate if you can subscribe. Now, the establishment of the State of Israel would, let's say, compel Beirut's Jewish community to make changes. Newspaper Al-Alam Al-Israelit changed the name to the Et Al-Salam. The Jewish community was also required to contribute some money to the Arab League Fund. In general, however, the Jewish community continued to live peacefully, and indeed, I think during 1948, Israel's War of Independence, the internal unrest in Lebanon during the 1950s, the Six-Day War, the Lebanese authorities ordered the police to protect the Jewish quarter in Wadi Abu Jamil. Additionally, wealthier Jews living among Christians and Muslims in the new suburbs were unharmed. The Alliance will continue its work and administered 3 other institutions. The organizational educational programs enrolled 950 pupils in 1965. But the Alliance school system wasn't necessarily a religious school system. I have to point out, many rabbis internationally will really criticize it or take a detrimental effect on the mitzvot observance, let's say. There were 250 students, so they would attend the Talmud Torah, while the religious school of Otzar Torah had 80 students. Remember, Otzar Torah was a much more religious school system there. During the 1950s and 1960s, the community council, which was made up of 9 members, was elected by Nilui. The council's Bikur Cholim was responsible for medical treatment for the poor, as well as for their hospitalization. If they were not Lebanese citizens, the council derived its income from the Arika, if I'm not mistaken, over there. And I think there was an assessment tax, which was paid by all men, as well as from endowments and synagogues. During this period, most of Beirut's Jews worked as merchants or employees of trading and financial companies. On the eve of the Lebanese Civil War, there was approximately 1,000 Jews in Beirut and a total of 1,800 Lebanese Jewish population at that point in time. So just a few more things we're going to wrap up in a few minutes over here. We spoke about the Beirut Jewish Cemetery, which was located in Ras Al Nab district. I think there was approximately 4,000 burials, including Rabbi Moise Yedid Levi, Rabbi Chaim Dana, and the Safra family members. Some of them we mentioned about that already. It's actually interesting for you. There was a famous Montefiore census of Jews in Lebanon. Now, Sir Moses Montefiore famously conducted censuses of the Jewish population of the land of Israel. And less well known is that he also reviewed the Jewish communities of Sidon and Beirut. The original documents are held by the Montefiore Endowment in London and transcribed by genealogical societies in Israel. Now, archives and libraries, I think, which really documents information about Lebanese Jewish community, includes the Lebanese National Archives, also known as Centre des Archives Nationaux, the France Archives, the Lebanese National Library, the Jaffet Library, the American University of Beirut, Central Archives, the History of the Jewish People of Jerusalem, CAHJP. Collection includes various documents and registrars from 19th to 20th centuries, letters from Lebanese communities to Hacham Bashi, the chief rabbi in Turkey, especially between 19th and 20th centuries respectively. Archives du Ministère des Affaires étrangères. The Archives de l'Alliance Israélite Universelle is featured there. The Sharia Courts record is featured there. Archives of Sunni Islamic courts included as the cases involving non-Muslims, and the Ottoman State Archives also. Now, among the Lebanese Jewish organizations include the Lebanese Jewish Community Council, or the Conseil Communal Israélite Libanais, nice, and the Patrimoine et Cultures de Juifs du Liban. This is another important place. Let's just say, when we're looking at genealogy of Lebanese Jewish community, and this is actually from the Sephardi genealogy website I'm taking this from, it lists the International Jewish Cemetery Project, the Les Fleurs de l'Orient, and a website of the Alain Farhi, the Ottoman documents on Mount Lebanon, 1861 to 1958. There were books, The Jews of Lebanon by Christian Schultz, a book, I think, and the video, I think, by Negi Zayden, very interesting enough. So we're going to conclude in just in a minute. We're just going to conclude now. Just talk about the Lebanese Jewish culture just for a minute, using the notes from the Sephardic U website. The Lebanese Jewish community has a rich cultural heritage with influences from both Jewish and Lebanese traditions. One of the most notable aspects of Lebanese Jewish culture is its cuisine, which features a blend of Middle Eastern and Mediterranean flavors. Traditional dishes includes kibbeh, a type of meatball made savory pastry filled with ground lamb and beef and pine nuts. Lebanese Jewish music, let's just say, is an important part of the Jewish community's cultural identity. Jewish songs and prayers are often accompanied by the oud, stringent instrument similar to a lute, and a tabla, a type of drum. Lebanese Jewish musicians have also made significant contributions to the wider Arabic music scene. Very interesting. Now, religious liturgy also. Let's talk about the Lebanese Jewish community follows the Sephardic tradition of Judaism, obviously, which originated like Sephardic rite and holds, I think, especially the Magen Avram would be a epicenter of this. The community also celebrates, obviously, all the Jewish holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Pesach, including among notable people, let's just say, in Lebanon. There were many people, we spoke about some of the rabbis, but other people include Albert Cohen, who was a famous writer and a novelist, who was actually born in Greece. to a family of Lebanese Jews. His work explored themes of identity, exile, and human condition. Another person, there happens to be philosopher Henry Cohen, who I believe was born in Paris, a Lebanese Jewish family. Now, I think, Henry Corbin was his name. So Corbin is known for his work on Islamic mystic and the society of religion. He was a professor of Islamic studies at the Sorbonne and is considered to be one of the most important scholars of Islamic philosophy in the 20th century. So that's very, very interesting. There's also a composer, singer, musician named Maurice Azar, who was born in Beirut in 1914. He studied at Paris Conservatory and went on to conduct many orchestras around the world. He was also a prolific composer and wrote music, let's say film, theatre and television in of itself respectively. So there's just a few highlights of the Lebanese Jewish community here on this special edition today, where we're just recording. Remember, friends, we've already recorded about many countries from all over the world at the moment here on this channel. So we're a community that is we've explored now about 22 countries from all over the world. We've spoken already about Gibraltar, we've spoken about the South American countries also on the series. We have spoken about Central American places also. We spoke a lot about, we did record videos in Costa Rica, Panama, El Salvador recently. We did Honduras yesterday. So please, everyone, subscribe to our channel. If you are new to the channel, join our community. We're nearing 8,000 subscribers. Let's try and get to the end of the week with this phenomenal achievement of 8,000 subscribers, friends. Really appreciate it. All the fantastic feedback you've been going. This was definitely a longer version of the videos that we've done, without a doubt. We've already been recording this now for, I believe we started this video, I think it was 1.5 hours ago. So we spoke about the different rabbis from Lebanon. We spoke about the synagogues. We spoke about the chief rabbis, the general history in of itself. We spoke about the burial plots that there happens to have been, and we went through different stages of Jewish history in from all the different time periods here in Lebanon. So that's very, very interesting. So very interesting. Now, friends, we're a community here. We are learning about great rabbis of yesteryear. So in this channel, what do? We record videos of the great rabbis of yesteryear, great Jewish scholars. We've spoken already about and recorded videos about maybe 8 to 10 rabbis that actually worked in Lebanon. That's very important to know. So we spoke about them also today inside the video. We do tours all over Israel. We like to explore different archaeological places all over Israel to really get the feel behind the streets of Jerusalem. Most of our tours that we've done have actually been in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem. We've toured all over Bet Shemesh. Also on this channel we speak about different current events that are shaking up the Jewish world, respectively. That's another thing that we do on this channel over here. And we do so much more. So many reasons to join. Also, we record a daily tidbit on the Talmud, the Daf Yomi, as they call it. So let's just say a page a day. That's a phrase to use within regards to that. So we've been recording that now for nearly, I believe, nearly 3.5 years. We've recorded more than 1,200 pages, like tidbits within regards to Daf Yomi, the daily page of Gemara. And we will also record videos about the weekly Torah portion, as we call it, the Parashat HaShavua. That's another project that we are working on at the moment. So we're not short on anything yet, thank God, over here. But I think on that note, we wish you all a fantastic day. Just recording this from the city of Bet Shemesh. And please, everyone, once again, join the channel. And thanks for watching. And please, if anyone's interested in watching these videos, pass these videos to other people also, so that they can also enjoy the history and the fabric of the Jewish community and Jewish history of Lebanon. So thanks for watching and have a great day.